gimmick. Okay, why is you doing this? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, as Dave hits the live button as I'm talking gibberish to myself. We're going to have a little bit of a spicy show today as I release my first 53-man roster projection. Here's the thing. I used a specific approach in order to kind of come to these conclusions. We're going to talk about why I used that approach and why I think it makes sense for the Minnesota Vikings and how they're continuing to shape this roster. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show. Managing editor of the USA Today's Vikings Wire. Betting and college football analysis for the Fantasy Points website. Publisher of Substack Run and Shooter. Host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Forno Show. I am your host, Tyler Fornes. With me, as always, back up in his home, the top right corner, it is producer Dave. Dave, how are you today?
I'm doing great, but your signal just went to shit again. Pardon my French, but it looks that way. It's been a long day. I was telling the guys, everybody that's in the chats already, Anthony, Davey, Norspecius, Justin, Harms, everybody that's here already. We've already started the show, already started to get ready to talk about the Vikings' final 53 as you are going to predict it and how you're going to predict it that way. Because it's there's a little bit of logic behind it. I don't think it's right, but there's a little bit of logic behind it.
You know what, Dave? All right, we're going to go there. You're being sassy, and I don't like it. And I just want to point out to Anthony, this is the hat that matters. All right, you see this? The F? Florida, not Florida State, not Free Shoes University, Florida. All right. Now I'm gonna put it back because I look dumb with forward-facing hats and they don't fit me very well. So let's talk about this. So there are a number of different ways that they can kind of look at how to do the final 53. I approached it from this perspective, and something that we saw last year, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has no issue going with his guys and saying bye to those from the previous regime. He cut 3 third-round picks and a 4th-round pick from the 2021 NFL draft. He had no problem with it, and he did it just like that. So the way I see it, Dave, is he's going to try and prioritize his guys again, and that doesn't necessarily mean drafted guys. It can also mean undrafted free agents. The guys that got cut, and I ended up keeping 5 UDFAs, which is a lot. And I think it feels a little absurd, but let me go through my logic here, okay? The guys that got cut in favor of those UDFAs are average at best. They don't provide you any real upside. They're depth guys on the roster. They're not going to play a ton. So why not save a little bit of cap space when you really need to try and pinch every dollar you can and keep the guys that Kwesi has brought in that he believes can make a difference on this team? Now, does that make complete sense? We'll go through it. We will go through every position group here today and why I ended up making the decisions that I did and why I think this could end up being a way that the Vikings end up building this roster. Now, I don't expect me to get all 53 right. I expect to have a few wrong, and I could be completely overlooking some aspects because I'm not in the room. And this is a projection. This is trying to understand the mindset of the Vikings front office and trying to go from there. So,
and Dave, things can come up. We get into preseason and somebody can get hurt, and that instantly opens a spot, and somebody could, make the team that way. You never know. Your logic behind this and why I know about it is that Tyler wrote about it yesterday. And where do we get our news? Vikings Wire, and you could see on there what he wrote. But we're going over it tonight because it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, the logic is sound, but I don't agree that's the way they're going to go about it.
Okay, so let's kind of go through it. All right, we're going to start with quarterback. We're going to work all the way down to the specialists. Quarterback, I have 3 making the team, and it's Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, and Jaren Hall. If this team only keeps 2 quarterbacks, one of 2 things has happened. Jaren Hall balls out in camp, and the Vikings end up moving Nick Mullins to a team who needs a backup quarterback in a similar way to how the Vikings acquired Nick Mullins last year, where they just weren't comfortable with their backup. And with Jaren Hall being an older prospect and already having experience in this offense, it's not out of the question that he balls out and you feel comfortable rolling with him as the backup, especially because Kirk Cousins has missed 1 game in 5 years, and that was due to COVID-19. You can kind of wipe the slate or whatever because it's a pandemic. That's fine. So if you roll with the rookie who you think has some developmental potential, all right, let's do it. And then the other avenue is if Jaren Hall absolutely stinks and pulls a Kellen Mond and you don't feel comfortable with him on your roster and you decide to try and send him to the practice squad and hope that, hey, everybody else is seeing that he has bad tape, so we're going to put him to the practice squad and kind of go from there. Those are the only 2 ways that I see this team only carrying 2 quarterbacks.
I don't disagree. No, you've got it sound there. Jaren Hall's going to ball out to earn the number 2 position. I doubt that happens, so he just keep all 3. I don't think he would make it past, to be cut and then make it onto the practice squad. I do not think that would happen.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, 90% of all outcomes are going to have Jaren Hall as the number 3 quarterback.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. It makes sense to me. He's the project. He is the Kevin O'Connell project. And so he's going to be given a leash to develop him. And that's the way that's going to go. And we're not going to see him gotten rid of unless he does something stupid off the field or he's absolutely horrible, which we all doubt is the case. But we expect Kevin O'Connell to at least make him eventually competent, right? He may be average, like you said, but at least competent, and we'll go from there. But I suspect there'll be 3 quarterbacks on the team when we hit that one and only final cut down.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's move on to running back. I have them keeping 4, and this is where kind of the spiciness comes into play. Alexander Madison, Ty Chandler, Dwayne McBride, and CJ Ham. You'll notice there's no Dalvin Cook. I believe he's gone by mid-June at the latest. You can also notice there's no Kene Nwangwu. That's intentional. And it feels kind of odd. But one thing that this defense, with the addition of Brian Flores, has preached is versatility. One thing that I believe is going to become a team theme, versatility. If you don't provide any value to us on offense or defense, then you are not valuable to us. And with a kick returner like Kene Nwangwu, awesome. 2nd team All-Pro. 3 kick return touchdowns in 2 years. It's also it's having him as a running back, he has shown to provide 0 value. And the way I believe they're constructing this running back room, they're going to want a 3rd running back with real running back value. I think that's not Nwangwu, and they're not going to use a full roster spot on a guy who's only going to give them 1 utility. So, as weird as it seems, they've also been bringing in multiple kick returners. Brandon Powell has success as a kick and punt returner, even returned 1 against the Vikings in 2021. And they also brought in Malik Knowles, who was a dynamite kick returner at the college level for Kansas State. I have a hard time seeing Kene Nwangwu making the roster if he has 0 utility outside of being a kick returner. Now, it's different in year 2. They knew he would be a project when they drafted him, and the new regime's like, okay, like, hey, you can be our 3rd/4th guy. Well, now he still hasn't shown anything, and you're going into his third year. If he's not going to give you anything in year 3, how much value does he have? He's not Devin Hester as a returner. He's very good, but he's not great. So where are they really going to keep him? I have my doubts. And it has nothing to do with how good his return ability is. He doesn't provide you any value elsewhere.
And as we progress through this, we've already put 3 quarterbacks in the quarterback room. That's usually one more than most teams take.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be that way. It used to be everybody had 3. But then they went down to 2, and that freed up a roster spot. Running back room at just 4 is about average, I would think, for most teams. Keeping 4, some years we've kept 5.
It depends if you keep the fullback, too.
Right. And on here, you have the fullback being kept. And I don't disagree with that. I think they love C.J. Ham. They're going to keep C.J. Ham.
He's a special teams ace, and he provides value on offense as a receiver, as a blocker. Like, this is a very versatile player who is a captain for your football team. And that's why he gets to keep a roster spot. That's why they gave him that contract extension. Like, C.J. Ham is a vital part of the team. But let's move on to wide receivers. I have 6. And this is on par with what they kept last year. Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, Brandon Powell, and Malik Knowles. You'll notice Jalen Reagor's not on there. I think that they're going to. With that. The only reason why I think Reagor makes the team is because it's a $2.4 million cap hit, no matter what they do, unless they trade him. If they cut him, it's the same cap hit. If they keep him, it's the same cap hit because it's a fully guaranteed rookie contract. Now, if they are able to trade him, Godspeed. Hell yeah. That sounds great. But he doesn't provide you anything on offense. And he showed that last year. He almost blew the Colts game twice. And like, you can't trust him to run the correct route. You can't trust him on offense. And if he turns a corner this year, hell yeah, that's great. I'm not expecting it. And I think that because he offers you no offensive utility, where you can sense a theme. Versatility. What can you give me on offense and defense along with that special teams prowess? I don't see anything from Reagor. So
well, and I don't call Reagor especially competent at punt returns. I want my punt returner averaging at least 9 yards per game. He did not. He fell short of that mark. Find another one that will.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, my dog just farted. Ooh, buddy. It's a bad one. The reason why Powell and Knowles get on here. Powell is a veteran. He's going to provide you special teams versatility. Plus, you can use him as a gadget guy. You can use him in the slot. You can trust him to do some offensive things. Knowles, I think, would have been drafted if he was able to test. And I know Thor Nystrom talked about it on our show on Purple Daily on Draft for Score North. He didn't test PCL cleanup. He's fine, but he didn't test. And he probably would have ran mid 4.4s. He has potential as a wide receiver, as kind of like that burner, maybe a little bit more if you're able to develop some of the nuance with him. But because of that special teams utility and offensive potential, both of those guys get roster spots. To me, you're continuing to see that theme. Versatility. And these are Kwesi and O'Connell guys. Like, they gave Reagor a shot. I thought it was a really smartly worked trade. It did not work. And you're going to take gambles like that. It's fine. It stinks that it didn't work. But you're going to have to cut bait at some point and move on. And hopefully we can get rid of that contract.
Don't disagree. No, you did good on that one.
Tight end. I have them keeping 4. And I'll kind of break down why. I could easily be talked into getting rid of 1 and adding a cornerback because I only kept 5. Spoiler alert. But because of the focus on 12 personnel, I think that they may end up keeping for, especially because of who they keep after TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, and that's Ben Ellefson and Nick Muse. Muse, obviously, they drafted around 7 last year, always viewed to be a project, very athletic, loves cats, and I think that's very important. He loves cats. But he's got some potential, and Ellefson is your standard third tight end, blocker, blocker, blocker. So you have your blocker. Oliver became a blocker after coming into the league as a receiver. I'm very intrigued by what he's going to be as the Vikings number 2 tight end. Probably only going to catch 20 or 30 passes, but what he does with those could be pretty damn good. And Johnny Munt. Johnny Munt's bad, and it's a 100,000 dead cap hit to cut him.
I don't know if I call it bad. He's Johnny Munt. He's adequate. Now, is Ben Ellefson better than Johnny Munt? I think they're right about the same level.
But I think Ellefson's a much better blocker, and that's why you're keeping him. Plus,
and younger
when it comes
and
down,
cheaper.
So, and that's why you're talking about Nick Muse over Johnny Munt. Like, you could argue Johnny Munt's better, but is he substantially better enough? Because like Nick Muse is entering year 2, has a higher ceiling, and is also $160,000 cheaper. I think that's why they keep Nick Muse over Johnny Munt. Again,
they'll try to get
with
Muse
that team,
onto the practice squad again, and they'll go with 3 tight ends.
That very well could be, and I could easily be convinced otherwise with that specific one. But I think that they're going to try and keep Muse on the active roster. That's just kind of where I'm at right now. But we'll see. Offensive line, I have 10.
Mm-hmm.
You have your starters: Christian Darrisaw, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, Brian O'Neill. Your backups: Chris Reed, Blake Brandel, Oli Udoh, Vidarian Lowe, Alan Ali, the UDFA center from TCU. I don't see a discernible difference between Austin Schlottmann, coming off a broken leg, and Alan Ali. I believe Ali has more potential, and he has guard flexibility, having played it at SMU before he transferred over to TCU when Sonny Dykes left for the Horned Frogs. That's kind of where I'm at with that one. Then you also have like Brandel and Udoh are kind of your swing tackles. Chris Reed has center versatility as well. Vidarian Lowe also is kind of a tackle. Udoh can play guard, so can Chris Reed. Alan Ali can play guard. So you have a lot of versatility on the back end. I think Schlottmann is a center. I don't think he's a guard, and that's why. Patrick chimes in, Chris Reed ain't making the team. I'm going to push back a little on that. They redid his contract. They guaranteed him like $800,000 to lower his total maximum value. He's making the team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, should he make the team? I think he was an adequate center. Like, he struggled a little bit early snapping the ball, but it's not his natural position. And I honestly think if Ed Ingram didn't have a really great preseason last year, he's our starting right guard in 2022. But Chris Reed also got injured during the preseason. That kind of muddied the whole thing. But I like Chris Reed. I don't think he's great. It says something when like fans of a team and analysts are like, man, stinks that we lost this guy. And he's like a rotational player in the offensive line. Like, I think he's a good, solid hand. I mean, maybe you don't want him as your starter, but you're not asking him to be. You're asking him to be a depth guy, and I think he can do that.
Now, if we needed a position on this, I would pretty much be assured that Alan Ali would make it to the practice squad. I don't think he's going to get scalped by some other team.
You never know. You're probably right, but I think that he can make it, and I'm not sold that Schlottmann is going to make this team. And like I said, positional versatility means more on the offensive line than arguably any other position.
Right, especially when you're scoring. If you use PFF scores and you're roughly in the 50s, you're not even at the 60 as an average. You want to be able to do that at multiple positions. Mm-hmm. That makes you more valuable than doing it at just one.
Bingo. Bingo, bingo, bingo. All right, this is where things get interesting. Defensive line. This is not edge rushers. This is your defensive ends, defensive tackles. I have 6. Dean Lowry, Harrison Phillips, Kyrus Tonga, Esezi Odomewo, Jaquelin Roy, Calvin Avery. James Lynch does not make this team. Neither does Jonathan Bullard. I think this is continuing the trend where you have younger guys who are cheaper, who are not going to be a drop off from what you are letting go. Bullard is a stalwart veteran. If he makes this team, he's starting. Like, he's a good, solid hand. But is he worth keeping over Odomewo? Is he worth keeping over a true nose, which this team does not have, in Calvin Avery? Of all the UDFAs, I am very confident Calvin Avery makes this team if he has a good preseason in camp, because he is a true 2-gapping nose tackle, and that defense needs it. Like, nose tackles are criminally undervalued as a general construct. So having a UDFA nose tackle make the team isn't necessarily what you would call a surprise. Nose tackles are just undervalued as a whole. James Lynch, average. He is mainly a motor guy. I think he fits best in this defense and not the 4-3. But at the end of the day, I just don't see him being a guy that they would prioritize keeping. And I think that they may end up moving on because I don't think he has any real upside. Odomewo, I think, does have upside. He's like a 93rd percentile athlete for a defensive lineman. And I think that they believe he can be a really good football player. Stampede says isn't really a nose tackle. I don't think he's a nose tackle in this defense. I think maybe you line him up as a 0 tech or a 1 tech on passing downs and ask him to rush the passer using that brute force power he has. But I don't want him 2-gapping in the run game. He's 307 pounds. Like, he's not that kind of player to me. And I know I've had this discussion with people who I think are really smart. They think he's a nose tackle. I don't in this defense. I think you might be able to have him as a 1 technique in a 4-3 where he's just 1-gapping. I don't think it's a 2-gapper. So I think he's a really interior guy on passing downs and a 4-eye or 5 technique on rush downs. The Dalvin Tomlinson comparison from Lance Zierlein kind of shares some credence to that, and I agree with it. But that's with defensive line. That's how I currently see it.
Well, optimum setup, you got that run stuffer in the middle, at least for the first 2 downs, and you want a interior defensive lineman, usually around the 3 technique, but we're talking 4-3 there, but somewhere in that area on the line that could push the pocket, because the quickest way to the quarterback is in the middle, believe it or not. It's not from the edges, which we'll get to next. And if you can find somebody that's disruptive in the middle on that line, you strike gold. Did the Vikings draft that individual? I have no idea. Jaquelin Roy, could he be that individual? Possibly, with some development. That's, I think, where the Vikings view him versus being, a squatty body sitting over the center. I don't see him in that spot. I see Phillips and Tonga playing that position all season, unless one of those two gets hurt. I don't see any of the other guys moving in. Could they? Yes, they could. But
yeah, defensive line is the hardest one to predict of all these, Dave, because there's the best defensive lineman we have is Dean Lowry and Harrison Phillips, but Harrison Phillips is not a 3-4 nose tackle. They're probably going to move him towards the outside, and you could go a million different ways with this defensive line, and none of them would be crazy. Like, you could have Kenny Willekes making the team, and I wouldn't bat an eye, because Willekes has shown to be a good player, and he had a really good camp last year. Like, this is a very weird unit to project, and I'm very intrigued to see how it turns out.
Well, I'm curious to see how Brian Flores sets them up and utilizes them, because I think that's going to be key to improving this defense quite a bit this season, is how he manages the interior of that defensive line.
Mm-hmm. That it's going to be very interesting to see how that all shapes up. This is where it gets spicy, Dave, and this is where I think you're going to have your biggest disagreements, and that's fine. 4 edge rushers kept. Last year kept 5. This year, because of how they're constructing the rest of the roster, it ends up being 4 because edge rusher is not as important as it is in this defense as it was in Ed Donatel's. Danielle Hunter, Marcus Davenport, Patrick Jones II, and Andre Carter II. No DJ Wanham, no Luigi Villain. And Wanham, I don't think is a fit in this defense. I don't think he's very good. And you're giving that guy a salary cap hit of over $2.9 million. If you cut him, it's like a $2.78 million cap savings. I don't think he's going to be worth that. And the drop-off, like if you put Patrick Jones in that spot, no drop-off at all. Like I don't think Wanham's that good. And he's not a fit with what this defense is. And combine that with, I can save, after you factor in Andre Carter's salary, your savings is $2 million. I think they take advantage of that.
They may. Yes, you are correct. This is where I disagree. I think Wanham has improved. It hasn't been great leaps and bounds, but he's improved every season he's played. I think he is probably your number 3 edge rusher behind the 2 starters. And I think they will keep him there because of that. Now, does he make it to his next contract? I doubt that. But I think they will keep him there for that. If they want to save the $2 million, yes, they could get rid of him. My other issue on this one is I'm not so sure they're going to keep Andre Carter. I know they paid him $300,000 guaranteed to be a UDFA. I know he has the height, but he doesn't have the build, and he's got to rebuild it. Now, will they risk keeping him on the roster just so they don't have the possibility of losing him, on his way to a practice squad? Possibly. But to me, when you draft a guy and you know it's going to take at least a year for him to develop, just to get into NFL body shape for the position, that's a flag for me. They're going to have to see an awful lot this summer and preseason for me to change my mind on that, because I frankly think people taken in that position where they're undrafted free agents, yes, there are the rare few that make it, but for the most part, they don't. And at least with one of them, you're getting average play. You're not getting great play, but you're getting average play. If somebody gets hurt on that defensive line, you don't want to, or on the edges, you don't want to have to go from above average with Davenport, elite with Danielle Hunter, down to anything below average. If one of those two get hurt, and we know Danielle's gotten hurt before, and Davenport's gotten hurt before, you don't want to go anything below average. If you suddenly have to go to Carter, who's not ready, we're going to get destroyed on that side of the ball, and he'll probably get ruined. So that's why I think they're not going to keep Carter on the active, at least not as the number 4 guy. They may do it as number 5, but not as number 4. That's my logic on that.
Well, your logic is wrong, Dave. It's wrong.
We'll see what they put on the pads and start hitting.
I think you could very easily keep 5 here. I couldn't end up finding a way to keep 5. And as we keep talking about the rest of these positions, I
already opened one for you. Tight end.
Yeah. But I would honestly, I'd rather keep a cornerback with this defense than an extra edge rusher. But we'll see. This is where
next time when you do this, rather than saving money logic, think of building for the future. Which are the key pieces they want to keep for not this year, but for next year and the year following? Look at guys
Well,
that are
I did
coming
that,
up on the end of
Dave.
their
I did that
contracts now.
too.
Okay.
Like all these guys that I cut, like Wanham's on the last year of his deal. James Lynch is on the last year of his deal. Like there's a rhyme or reason to why. Like Jalen Rager, last year of his deal. Dalvin Cook, bye. I mean, we already know he's going. But it's a cost cutting move, but you're doing it because they're on the last year of their contracts. You're not going to bring them back, and they're average at best. And I would rather take a guy who is maybe a little less of a player now, but could be more than that in a couple of years because you're preparing for the future. So that's already being talked about with this scenario. But let's continue on. We've got a couple more position groups to go. Inside linebacker, this one I found relatively easy, but it's also very difficult. The top two are easy. Brian Asamoah and Jordan Hicks. Then I had Troy Reeder and Ivan Pace Jr. Ivan Pace Jr., there's a reason why he picked us. This dude's going to be a specialist maven for Brian Flores, and he's going to be a special teams ace. When you watch him during preseason, he's going to look like Kentrell Brothers, wearing that number 40, small, undersized linebacker who is just a really good gap shooter and great on special teams. Reeder, I don't think Dye's any good. He's good on special teams, but he's not a linebacker. Reeder is a at best average linebacker, and I think he's a good number 3 in this room, whereas I don't think Dye is that guy. And you're replacing the special teams value that Troy Dye brings you with Ivan Pace Jr. So that's kind of how I ended up constructing the room. But it's for as easy as it is, it wasn't very easy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we need to improve the quality of linebackers over the next few years. Beyond Brian Asamoah. Yeah. And hope Brian Asamoah is a hit.
Yeah. All right,
I agree with this, and I think we keep Pace because I think he's going to be even as undrafted rookie, I think he's going to be a special teams stud. Like a little bug. There we go.
Yeah.
Justin Pace gang.
Cornerback. This one, I only kept 5, and I could easily be talked into keeping a 6th. Byron Murphy Jr., Andrew Booth Jr., Caleb Evans, Joejuan Williams, Kai Blackman. I did not include Jay Ward in this group. I included him in safety. So if you're kind of thinking that, no, I think he's going to be classified as a safety. He's already been classified as a safety by the Vikings. Safeties can play nickel. So I think that's really important. Maybe Tay Gowan gets a shot here as that 6th guy, but I think that these 5, unless they make another move, are going to be the ones that make the team. You could make an argument for Najee Thompson. If you go on VikingsWire.com, Kevin Fielder did a tremendous piece on Najee and his absolute obsession and love for special teams. But based on the motif of how this was constructed, he provides you no other utility other than special teams. So I did not put him on the final 53. I think he's a practice squad guy who gets elevated for special teams a couple times, then maybe ends up being on the roster with an injury. But that's the cornerback room. I could be convinced to take a 6th, and that would probably be Tay Gowan, but I ended up keeping that 4th tight end, which is why we have one less defender.
I would not keep 6. I wouldn't keep Gowan out of that group. I would move one of our safeties down and take another safety.
So you would add a 5th safety rather than adding a 6th corner,
with the idea that safety's playing nickel.
Mm-hmm. All right,
Cameron Bynum.
Let's move on to safety because the specialists, it's the 3 already on the roster: Greg Joseph, Ryan Wright, Andrew DePaula. So we don't need to spend a lot of time. This is where things get really spicy because this is a shockingly deep room. Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, Lewis Seen, and Jay Ward are your 4 safeties. Josh Metellus does not make the team here, and I think this is where your argument was going, Dave, keeping that extra defensive back, but not keeping an extra cornerback. Metellus is great on special teams. He's shown to be an average safety, which is really good for your number 3 guy, but he's also in the last year of his deal, and he's likely not going to be re-signed. So he ends up kind of getting that same same treatment as James Lynch, as Troy Dye, where he's on the last year of his deal, and we're just, hey, you know what? We're just going to end up moving on because we just don't have the spot for him on the roster. Whether that's right or wrong, that can be debated, especially because of how good he is on special teams, multiple kick blocks and all that stuff. But that's kind of how I ended up shaping this. I could easily be talked into with just like with the cornerback, taking a tight end out. But I think they're going to want to keep multiple tight ends because of that 12 personnel. But we'll see. There's a lot of elements to this, and
it's a difficult exercise because we see all these guys. We drafted all these guys. We took all these wonderful heralded undrafted free agents. We signed 2 Minnesota guys yesterday, right? And today, Jordan Anderson signed his contract. So the whole draft class is under contract. Everybody's happy. Kumbaya. Look at these guys. They're going to develop. They're going to be good. When in reality, as much as we want that, as the hope blooms in our chests for the 2023 season and we're going to win the Super Bowl and all of that, not all of that works out in reality. There will be people that do not make the team. There will be people that falter that you thought should not falter. There'll be people that get injured, etc. And it's harder to make the team the further down the list we go. Out of all the draft picks, I see one starter, immediate starter. That's it, period. All the rest are going to have to earn time. Now, are they going to play special teams? Oh, they better. They better. But it's tough, and where we may disagree on some of the older guys, if I wanted to keep Metellus and he's in his last year, or I wanted to keep, who else was it? That was in Wanham, and he's in his last year. There's where we get into what, are we staying competitive? What's the best for competitive, and what's the best for rebuild? Because can we defer part of the rebuild out while staying competitive, or are we sacrificing some of competitiveness for the rebuild and hope that nothing goes wrong? And that's where I see it could be slightly different than what you have here. Your logic's fine. Hey, save a few bucks, which helps. We all know we need to do extensions on TJ and JJ and Danielle Hunter. Those are going to come up. Do they have to do JJ's this year? No. It'd be smart to do JJ's this year. It'd probably be cheaper than waiting a year. But do they have to? No. But they need TJ and Hunter done. And then we know next year, Darisaw is going to need one. Those are big chunk money. So they're walking a tightrope. It always has been. That's the way this team works. That's why we're always around 500. And Vegas has us at 8.5 wins, which I think is ridiculous, but okay.
Yeah.
Take the over.
I think 8.5 is a good number because I could easily see 8. It's probably not going to be 7 or 6, but 8 is very plausible with the schedule. 9 is likely, but that's why Vegas is in the business they're in. They're very good at they're good at pinpointing that middle ground and making it a difficult bet. But Dave, that's our show. This is going to be interesting to track. I'm going to kind of continue to work through and get through all the information from mini camps, from OTAs, and then use that to continue updating what those projections are going to be. And I think that's going to be important. It's the more information we have, the easier it's going to be. So one thing that I find interesting here, as far as we continue to contextualize, is I'm hoping to end up with credentials here soon, and then I'll be able to be on at practices, being able
on the
to watch,
sideline, getting sunburned.
Yep, being able to talk to players, being able to talk to coaches, and all that stuff. So once that ends up happening, we'll be in a much better spot to kind of relay some of this information. But it's a very interesting dichotomy with this team right now and kind of how everything's going to shape up. But there's talent on this team. We'll see who ends up rising above the rest.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to give my hats off to you for a very good, logical way of going about this, and we'll find out. That's what's fun. That's what's part of being a fan and playing armchair GM / coach, talent evaluator, and we can't wait to see the actual tape of these guys, and then in the preseason games how they do. Then we'll start screaming for them. I got to keep this guy, and we'll find out. So it's been fun. Have you got anything coming up in the near future?
Yeah, more scouting reports are coming, and it's summer scouting. So I just posted one for Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers this afternoon, and it's meant to be a snapshot of where they're at and a general draft projection as of right now. So when you see them, it's not full scouting reports. It's, hey, here's some details about what this guy is right now. And then we can compare them to when we do full scouting reports at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Ewers has all the talent in the world. He is tied for first in the best, being one of the highest ranked recruits ever by 24/7 Sports, the recruiting national outlet. So that is a big deal. He was nicknamed Mullet Mahomes with how he was able to throw the football on the run, a lot of different arm angles. He also hurt his shoulder really bad in week 2 against Alabama, and he was destroying that Alabama defense early on. But then after that, he struggled once he came back from the injury. So how much of that had to do with the shoulder? Because Baker Mayfield struggled really bad after he tore his labrum and is not throwing shoulder in 2021. We're going to find out. Plus,
because believe it or not, when you do this, it's linked all the way to the other side.
The kid also went to college a full year early, Dave. So he started as a sophomore at 18 years old. So like this kid's uber talented and very young. So it's going to be really fun to watch his growth and development. But yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. And then every Monday afternoon, Purple Daily on Draft on the Purple Daily podcast and YouTube feed with myself and Thor Nystrom. And I'll have more stuff coming throughout the summer. AEW Dynamite's on in 12 minutes, and I host an AEW podcast, so that'll be fun as well.
Cool. Well, if you heard this morning, we had another Vikings Daily opener go out. I even reported on you starting your summer scouting and building up the database because we'll need it for next year, right? And you put it in the back of your mind. A lot of people don't get into scouting until the 2023 season's over. But you'll be ready, and you'll have more stuff than just about anybody else, and especially anybody else in our Viking sphere. So I applaud you for that. Great work. Keep it up. And then for the rest of the week, we'll have Vikings Daily Opener every morning, and then, of course, 2 old bloggers on Sunday, where Darren will get to chime in on whatever, turns his crank this week, and I'm sure there'll be something. Appreciate everybody joining us today. It's a great show. For all you guys coming on, love it. Missed Miss Mary tonight. I don't know where she is. Hopefully she's doing well. With that, what do we say, buddy?
SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Fornes and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!